Thank you very much, and welcome back to Governance Week 2026 as we continue day 4 of our focus on family-owned businesses and SMEs under our general theme of governance in a volatile world. We had a really great presentation this morning from Brian Imambaks from Suriname, followed by a panel discussion that we all wish did not have to end. Professionalizing the family enterprise with boards, controls, and strategic discipline. Our panelists were Kiran Maraj from the Media Institute of the Caribbean, Dr. Vishnu Durga, Chairman of Action Invest Caribbean, and Andrea Ball, Chief Financial Officer from DL Financials Group in Jamaica, with our moderator, Angela Singh. It was such a great session and has set the bar high, but I know we have this panel to come, which is going to be just as excellent. And this panel is going to look at the topic leading through disruption, governance and risk for SMEs. Our panelists are Sonji Pierre Chase from the former president, forgive me, Sonji, of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber. In fact, she's the immediate past president. We also have Emerson John Charles, who is Innovation Association of Trinidad and Tobago's chairman. And replacing Mikaeel, Dr. Mikaeel Mohammed, we have Riyadh Singh, who is the Chief Operations Officer of Farm and Function Limited. I will have our moderator do a better introduction of our panelists in a short while, because what I will do is bring him on and we will introduce our moderator for this panel, and that's Brendan King. Brandon, of course, is not just a senior advisor with Emerson Young, he's one of our directors here at CCGI and one we appreciate very much. So Brandon is joining us from his home in Canada. As a senior advisor, Brandon works closely with EY Caribbean team to assist clients in the financial services, energy, hospitality, and tourism, marketing, and other industries with advancing their strategic agendas. He started his career with Scotiabank in the 1990s in the commercial banking sector and then joined International Banking Division a couple of years later, with his first assignment in that International Banking Division being right here in the Caribbean at Cayman Islands. He took on increasingly responsible roles in Trinidad and Tobago and the Bahamas, where he sat as Managing Director of Corporate Finance. He then joined the Asia Pacific region in 2004 as country head for Greater China and added corporate development responsibilities for the Asia Pacific region. Now, in the past, he's also served as chairman for Scotiabank here in Trinidad and Tobago, and chairman of Scotiabank in the Dominican Republic as well. Currently, Brandon serves on several boards: First Global Bank Limited, Grace Kennedy Money Services Limited, Grace Kennedy Financial Group Limited, and Signia Globe Financial Limited. Brendan holds an MBA in Finance and International Banking and a BA in Business Economics from York University in Toronto. He has a diploma in General Management from the Canadian Bankers Association, a marketing certificate from Queen's University in Ontario, and has completed an executive development program at Duke University. Not only that, he now also holds an ICD, which is the Chartered Director designation, a diploma from the Institute of Corporate Directors, University of Toronto. Brendan, it is always such a pleasure to have you here with us for Governance Week, and I happily hand over this panel into your hands as we look at your topic of leading through disruption, governance and risk for SMEs.
Thank you so much, Kamla, for the long introduction. I'm feeling old now, but it does highlight one thing I'm very proud of is my connection to the Caribbean. Living in the Caribbean for 10 years and then coming back as Scotiabank's head of the Caribbean and Central America was the highlight of my career, as was being chair of the boards in Trinidad and the DR and vice chair in Jamaica. So my connection to the region is deep and continues. I'm now chairman of the board as well of First Global Bank in Jamaica. So continuing to work closely in the Caribbean and heading there next month as well. So really pleased to be joined by some distinguished panelists today. I'll jump into their introductions. Sonji Pierre Chase, attorney at law for the JCS law firm. She has over 26 years of experience in property law, conveyancing, and commercial transactions. She has advised major financial institutions on security documentation, commercial leases, and landlord and tenant matters. She also has extensive experience in mineral title analysis and oil mining leases. She's a team lead and head of conveyancing and the property department of her law firm, JCS Caribbean Law, and has served as president of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce during the period of 25 to 2026, is now immediate past president. Our second panelist, Emerson John Charles, really interesting background, is an innovation management strategic specialist, specializing in the design and implementation of structured, scalable innovation systems for both high growth startups and established enterprises. Emerson holds a master's degree in business development and innovation and a bachelor's degree in business administration. And we're very pleased to welcome Riyadh Singh, who kind of joined us with just 24 hours notice. So really pleased he could step up to the pitch for us. And Riyadh is a career food manufacturing and agribusiness professional with over 30 years experience throughout the Caribbean in senior roles, and is now the Chief Operating Officer of Farm and Food. So welcome you all, and I'll turn it over to Sonji for her presentation.
Thank you so much, Brandon, and thank you to Kamala and the CCGI team for having me. Kamala, I will let you know that when we had our side table conversation a few minutes ago, I was saying to Brandon, I listened on the panel discussion just before ours, and it is fortuitous that my conversation is a continuation of that conversation. I was quite pleased with the presentations of those panelists, and it fit in directly with what it is I wanted to come and speak to the members today about. And when I thought about what it is I will speak about or discuss in relation to the topic that you presented to us, it came from a SME conference that the Chamber had earlier this year, Catalyst. And we had a panel of SME family-owned business, a three-member panel speaking on it. And one of the questions that I had posed to all of the panelists is business continuity. How would they prepare to adopt with survivability, what measures they had in place, for the continuation of their business. If their children had no desire of continuing the business, if they require capital for expansion, how would they treat in with that? And what legally were the considerations they had at the forefront of their mind? And interestingly, the answers from each of them were remarkably different, but concluded with the sense that there was no fixed plan. It was a family business and it will remain a family business to the end. And then I pitched the idea to them. There is an interest in the Caribbean because we are so connected with things that we buy, goods or services. We have a vested interest in it. We feel that it's part of our culture. I pitched to them the idea of initial public offerings, and I inquired of them if they knew about initial public offerings and what it can do in raising capital for expansion, continuity, especially when you don't have the younger generation wanting to remain in the family business. And again, interestingly, none of the panelists had any interest in going after IPOs as a form of raising capital. And that is what triggered my thought process in terms of what I will speak to this afternoon. In the sense that in the SME market, we only think about debt financing and equity financing, and we really don't look at all of the options. So before I get to the meat of what I want to say, let me just throw out a few facts that I had put together or found. Our central bank has indicated that the cost and the lack of financing are the greatest constraints for the SME development in our market. In fact, there is this gap of about 1.2 billion US dollars that the SME sector requires for expansion, continuity, survivability. And the central bank had estimated that between 75 to 85% of our SMEs are either underfunding, they're unaware, totally unaware of other measures of financing. They know nothing about crowdfunding. They know nothing about capital markets, angel investors, IPOs. And I had a forehand experience when I had pitched that to the panelists who were all members of these family-owned businesses. So taking that into account, I said, why are Caribbean, not just Trinidad and Tobago, Caribbean SMEs not either aware of IPOs or not interested in IPOs? And this is where the conversation continues from what was being discussed earlier. So we have 3 countries in the whole Caribbean that have junior stock exchange. Jamaica first, then Barbados, and then, we got into the mix last. And ours actually is the least performing one. We have about 4 companies listed on it. Cinema One, MedCorp, Solace, and Endeavor Holdings. And it shows you the range that we are in: digital media, medical services, real estate holding, and Solace being into the printing and packaging industry. And that's the extent of it. And one of your panelists said earlier, and I think is Dr. Vishnu, said earlier, the legislative measures in place are so generous. Why is there not an attraction of people taking up the offer? So for us, we have this tax incentive, yes. So the first 5 years of listing, you get 0% towards corporate tax. So you pay no corporate tax for the first 5 years. And then for the next 5 years, you pay only 50%. So that is a really attractive measure to encourage you to explore listing as a means of raising capital. But still, there is a lack of interest. And why is that? It is in large part due to compliance. And that is where I came in terms of looking at the legal aspect of it. So the legal constraints imposed upon the SME sector are so voluminous and so overwhelming. It is more of a distraction, or is more of what is the word I'm looking for? A turnoff, so to speak, as a means of raising capital. So if I have to just dissect a few of these requirements for audience, it will be summarized as follows. The SMEs must require to have interim financial statements. They have to file these financial statements within 60 days at the end of a financial period. They have to have comparative audited financial statements within 90 days of every financial period. They have to do annual reporting, and this reporting must be done within 120 days at the end of the financial year, and it must contain, at a minimum, the comparative financial statements and management discussions. They have to file material change notices with the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange Commission within 3 days of those material changes occurrence. And there's a cost to that, of course, because it has to be published publicly in the newspaper. Anything that triggers a material change in the issuer's affairs is required to be published, because it is considered a significant effect on the market and on the value of the securities. So for an SME who would not have a dedicated finance or in-house counsel to assist with them meeting these deadlines, meeting these compliance measures on a quarterly, half-yearly, or annual basis, will be extremely difficult. The compliance calendar becomes a permanent fixture for the corporate life of this company, and it is not going to change in any respect, because as you remain a publicly listed company, the obligations remain with you. So before any single share is sold to the public, before you engage in that initial public offering, which is what I was pitching to those panelists that day, The SME then has a substantial upfront compliance exercise because you have to prepare a prospectus, which has to be approved by the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, of course. And this exercise requires a lot of disclosure. So your panelists earlier had intimated to the fact that you have family-owned businesses that operate in secrecy. I think it was Dr. Vishnu who said it. They open a business, or maybe it was Kiran, they open a business and the business function to meet their needs at the minute, to pay their bills, send their children to school, and give them that financial independence. Nothing above that is in their consideration. So having to disclose now how you do business and ensuring that you have the measures in place of how your business processes or work will be foreign to them. Asking them to put that into a perspective, so put those arrangements in place, is almost like, speaking Greek or German to a family-owned SME business. So in the end, what we have is a continuation of struggle for Caribbean SMEs that are in the main. I mean, my research tells me that more than 80% of the SMEs throughout the Caribbean, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, are really family-owned businesses. 80% of all our businesses that fall into that category struggle for continuity measures to meet these requirements because of the risk and governance processes that are in place. So you have an option. Either you want your business to survive, and when we say survive, we don't mean that you have a business that is in existence for 50 plus years. When we say survive, we mean survive with growth. So Colin earlier had mentioned the Butch Stewart example. And when I heard his comment, you know what came to my mind? Butch Stewart actually was our Jeff Bezos. He came up with a unique idea that wasn't thought of in the Caribbean at all at his time. Imagine a self-contained hotel of luxury that you don't even have to leave the borders of the hotel because everything is at your fingertips. He designed this luxury arrangement and then, of course, laid out through all of the Caribbean islands. But then just came up with the idea, designed it and implemented. He bettered it. So he is known or established in the Caribbean as the one who came up with that all-inclusive arrangement. And this is an all-inclusive arrangement of a very high standard because he bettered the product every time he launched or extended his brand. At the time he created that concept, nobody thought of that as a holiday in measure. But because he was an environment, in the Jamaica environment, where crime was very high, and you want to attract tourists into the country, you want to improve your tourist product, why not design a product where you have all of the amenities, the sunset, the sun, the beautiful weather, but protect and insulate your guests in such a way that when they come straight into Montego Bay, they're not even flying through Kingston, they come straight into Montego Bay or wherever, they have the best experience in the world, and then they leave and they could come back again next year. So it is a concept that nobody thought about, that he developed, and then he bettered it. So he didn't need to think about these conversations that we're having now because he had a product that nobody else had, and not only just developing and starting the product, he bettered the product every time he launched a new one. So I have quite a lot more that I wish to say. No, we attorneys just love to talk when we are given the mic, but I'm sensitive to the fact that we do have other panelists. So I will jump back in a little later on when I hear the other contributions.
That was wonderful, Sonji. A great introduction to a very compelling topic. Raised a bunch of interesting questions about family businesses and financing gaps and IPOs. Compliance issues, I think all very strong issues that we can talk about, in our sessions and at the Q&A at the end as well. But right now, let me turn it over to Emerson, who'll talk to us about innovation and the challenges that gives us. Emerson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me get started. So, thank you for your initial contribution, Sonji. And I didn't listen to the previous sessions, but I'm sure that one of the main themes today was that the business world as we know it is changing and it's not coming back. For decades, good corporate governance meant reducing risk, strengthening controls, improving efficiency, and protecting the business. That was not weakness. That was how many SMEs and family-owned businesses survived, grew, and served our communities. But today, they are no longer sufficient because we are no longer operating in an age of stability. We are governing through an age of continuous disruption. Economic shocks, artificial intelligence, geopolitical uncertainty, climate change, new business models. Entire industries are being reshaped faster than many organizations can respond. The questions for SMEs is no longer how do we preserve what we have? It is how do we ensure this business remains relevant tomorrow? And this is why innovation is no longer simply a competitive advantage. It has become a governance imperative. The evidence is compelling. Boston Consulting Group reports that while 83% of executives rank innovation among their top strategic priorities, only 3% believe they are highly effective at delivering it. At the same time, Accenture's Global Disruption Index shows that economic, technological, geopolitical, and social disruption has increased by more than 200% over the past 5 years. Innovation has never been more important, yet organizations have never felt less prepared. And we in the Caribbean face an even greater challenge. We are globally recognized for creativity. We produce extraordinary music, culture, and designs. But creativity alone does not create competitiveness. Creativity says, look at what we made. Innovation asks, who owns it? Who protects it? Who scales it? Who commercializes it? And of course, who captures the value? Just ask our world-famous Trini matheman Peter Minshall and the lost billions from his invention of the globally popular inflatable tube man, some mean it as the sky dancer. Again, we are creative, but not innovative. So whether we are examining the Global Innovation Index, Harvard's Economic Complexity Index, the United Nations Frontier Technologies Readiness Index, WIPO's Innovation Capability Outlook, or the recent Carib Equity Caribbean Innovation Ecosystem Report, the message is remarkably consistent. We remain one of the least innovative regions in the global economy, and that should concern every leader in this webinar, because countries that struggle to innovate eventually struggle to compete, and we are seeing it already. Our businesses are losing relevance, our productivity is stagnating, our investments are declining, economic growth is slowing, except for Guyana, of course, and our societal problems of crime, youth unemployment, and the brain drain continue to rise. So the question is, what can our businesses do about it? Today's environment rewards organizations that learn faster than competitors, experiment more intelligently, adapt continuously, and convert uncertainty into opportunity. And this presents a governance challenge, as the paradox is that our previous strengths and norms that served us in the past often constrain and strangle breakthrough innovations, and sometimes the inventors and innovators themselves, before they can take root. Because most of our boards and SMEs were designed to oversee organizations built for execution and to reduce uncertainty. And balancing this new orientation that is built for exploration and learning, for embracing the fuzzy front end of innovation, where uncertainty is the norm, is difficult. That requires balancing accountability with experimentation, discipline with adaptability, and governance with innovation. And unfortunately, many organizations unintentionally work against themselves. You go and you recommend new business models, new ways of serving customers, new markets, and these things often cannibalize existing sales and impact power structures, and most times triggers what I call the corporate immune system. But I want us to pivot for a bit, and I want to paint a scenario. So your firm is feeling the pain of lost market share, declining revenue, and makes note of the international trends and global competitors, and decide to assemble a team of 1 to 3 people and make a grand announcement that you now have an innovation unit in your SME. and that's wonderful. But if you ask a simple question, what capabilities will this department build? What exactly are they going to be doing? Too often I find the answer is unclear, because successful innovation is not built around projects. It's built about capabilities and structured systems. And there are three capabilities every innovation unit should be overseeing. The first, the capability to sense change. So organizations must constantly scan the external environment to understand what is changing and what those changes mean for their business. And disruptions may come from anywhere. It could originate in Silicon Valley, it may come from Shenzhen, it may emerge from Nairobi, or from a small startup that no one has heard of. But we know for sure that disruption is coming and it's here. And the key governance question is, what is changing around us? The second capability is the ability to internally adapt. Organizations must continuously strengthen their own capabilities and ask yourself, are you encouraging learning? Are you experimenting intelligently? Are you developing the skills required for tomorrow rather than yesterday? And the key question becomes, how much we improve the way we operate? The third capability is to connect with our ecosystem, because no organization innovates alone. Innovation increasingly happens through ecosystems of suppliers, customers, and strategic partners. Imagine you are trying to be agile and trying to grow on a fast level, but all of your key stakeholders are still stuck in the old ways of doing things, are not along with you for the journey. Your ecosystem could constrain your growth and profitability. So there must be a focus on collaboration and end the silos and that way that Sonji mentioned of people looking to keep all the ideas and information to themselves, that's secrecy. And the key question becomes, who can help us create greater value? And I want you to notice something interesting. These capabilities, these three capabilities, are difficult for competitors to observe. And so they cannot simply copy your culture. They cannot easily replicate your learning systems. They cannot imitate the relationships and trust you have built across your ecosystem. And that is why innovation capability itself becomes a lasting competitive advantage. A CEO once told me about one of his competitors who was outperforming everyone during some difficult market conditions. And he said, "See, Emerson boy, all I know is they hire a bunch of young people and they let them loose." So he recognized that innovation mattered. He simply didn't understand the system behind it. And so, fortunately, organizations no longer need to guess what effective innovation management looks like. We now have ISO 56001, which is the world's first international standard for innovation management systems. And I'm proud to say that I contributed to this international standards as I'm a member of that international committee. And the standard, it provides leaders with a globally recognized framework for building the culture, governance, leadership, processes, and capabilities needed to innovate consistently. But despite its importance, only 2 Caribbean countries, Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, have adopted the ISO 56001 as their national innovation standard. And as innovation management is a major source of competitive advantage and is about building new engines of growth, one must wonder why the other Caribbean nations have not come on board. And ultimately, innovation is about results. We want innovation impact, not innovation theater, which I find is all over the Caribbean. Lots of activities. But when you ask them, what's the new revenue? What's the new competitive advantage, new business models? Are there better customer experiences? There's hardly any talk on that. And as I conclude, I want you to imagine a Caribbean known not only for sun, sea, sand, and carnival, but also for research and development, design, advanced manufacturing, IP, and globally competitive SMEs. A region known for creating disruptors instead of being disrupted. And this future will not happen by chance. It will happen because owners, boards, directors, advisors, and families choose to govern differently. So as we move into this panel, I invite us to listen not only for risks to avoid, but for capabilities to build. Because leading through disruption is not about predicting the future perfectly. It's about building businesses that are ready to sense, adapt, connect, and create value no matter what the future brings. Thank you.
Wow, that was wonderful, Emerson. Really innovative, as it should be. A couple of great points there. I especially love the point, creativity doesn't lead to value. It's not an automatic thing, right? You've got to have the systems, processes, governance in place to do it. So I would love to talk more about that as we go through the panel. And last but not least, our pinch hitter this evening, Riyadh Singh.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. One caveat, I had 24 hours to prepare, so...
Understandable.
Yeah, so my background is in food, so I think it's a good complement and a good break from the others. Innovation, the legal side, and then, food security. We all have to eat to survive. And, for small and medium enterprises in the Caribbean, I know I don't look it, but I'm incredibly old. So I've been working in CARICOM region for the last 30 years, from Suriname to Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, you name it. And the small and medium enterprises really are the lifeblood of our region, and yet they are uniquely vulnerable. Not only because of our geography, but the size and the disparity of the islands. From hurricanes, earthquakes, disruption in global supply chains, pandemics, the accelerating pace of digital change. Disruption is no longer an exception. It's the environment in which we have to operate in today's world. And, a disruption for small and medium enterprises is basically anything that is significant, that affects the smooth routine running of that company or that business in an unplanned way that has deleterious effects on the company. And in this context, governance becomes more than compliance. It's about building resilience. Strong governance means leaders can make agile decisions while maintaining transparency and trust. It means, what does this really mean for the small and medium enterprises? They have to adopt structures. And these are themes that was touched on by Sonji and in the earlier, from the earlier panelists this morning. A lot of the family businesses, the structure is not embedded, it's not there, or at least the amount that it needs. Whether it's formal boards or advisory networks that help them anticipate risks, to act responsibly. And in our Caribbean setting, where reputation and community ties are so critical, governance is also about environmental and social control. It is not only about compliance. And the risks are real: financial fragility, limited access to credit in the Caribbean, exposure, again, as I said, to climate change, and the growing importance of cybersecurity and cyber threats. Now, ultimately, leading through disruption requires courage and foresight. It requires us to prepare for multiple scenarios. And what I would be talking a lot about today, is how I think we should invest as small and medium enterprises on systems, protocols, and technology, and to build networks of collaboration throughout the Caribbean and beyond. Because if governance is the compass, then resilience is the vessel that is going to carry us, as CARICOM or the Caribbean, through disruption and uncertain waters and times. So for me, some of the high risks that we have is, first of all, for small and medium enterprises, one of the things we should always consider is the internal risk with human capital. How many companies have succession plans? Normally, if you look at, even in my own consultancy, a significant amount of my clients, there's no succession plan. Actually, this in the earlier panel, I think one of the keynote speakers mentioned that, it's very common that a founder of a company is on holiday or vacation, or something happened to them and they couldn't be there. And that part of the business has to wait until that person gets back either from their vacation or from, whatever took them away from the business. So the human capital and succession planning is a big, big component of how we deal with disruption, supply chain vulnerabilities, and infrastructure challenges. I've spent my entire career in food manufacturing, food production, from the ground level to the board level. And, one of the things that really is very, very pertinent in the Caribbean, and the pandemic made it very, very obvious, is supply chain. The whole world shut down during the pandemic. At that time I was living in Suriname and working in Suriname. We couldn't get certain inputs for our business from where we were normally getting it in Europe. And we had to innovate or adapt and get things trucked through Brazil, throughout South America for business continuity, right? Then you put in that on a boat and get there. So the supply chain, and that is not going to go away, because we see what is happening in the world right now with political instability. Supply chains are being held to ransom. These are the things we need to look at in the Caribbean as small and medium enterprises, because it is one of the reasons that they close down. A lot of small companies close down because of supply chain, of rising prices. So what we need to do is build the structure in our companies to mitigate that. Regulatory compliance. Regulatory compliance supposed to be the cornerstone of all governance. And yet, in a lot of small and medium enterprises, it is the only target that is hardly ever achieved. Because regulatory compliance in your country, you also have to look throughout CARICOM, the wider world, and diverse jurisdictions. How do we plan for that? If there's a disruptive event and we haven't anticipated that we now cannot meet the challenges of the regulatory requirements in a country, that is significant or almost all of our business. Cybersecurity threats targeting SMEs. Even some of the larger conglomerates I have worked with are playing catch up. And this is one of the things that the SMEs have to look at. It's not a nice to have, it is a point of survival. You have to, how many companies right now have no protection against cyber attacks, have no backups offsite, and actually, they in one night, all of their payroll information is gone, all of their banking information is gone. And these are real examples that have happened in the Caribbean that I am aware of in the last couple of years. So for me, one of the things that is no longer nice to have is business continuity planning and succession planning and crisis management planning for every single business. Is no longer the days where the founder is the successor, is the business plan. You have to get to him to find out what to do next if there's a disruptive event. It's no longer nice to have. And governance is what leading, if you lead through proper governance, you have to put in these structures in place. Even if it is, it may seem odious to founders, especially to the founders and the initial executives that were there at the beginning of the company, because it takes away a lot of their perceived micromanagement and decision-making power, because there's a system in place if something goes wrong. So I don't have to call Uncle Charles anymore to find out, what he think we should do if something happens then. You must have the business plan, you must have succession planning, and you must have crisis management plans. And to having a plan, having these things done, it has to be practiced with real life scenarios. So it's not, the next step is not only enough to have this in a folder somewhere and you close it down like a coffin and you put it there on a bookshelf. It has to be revisited. It has to be part of your rolling strategic plan. And it doesn't matter how big a company is or how small it is. It is an essential part, and it is a part that it is the only way that allows for resilience when a disruptive event happens. Because you can anticipate a certain disruptive event in a certain area, but you cannot predict it, and you cannot tell exactly what is going to be the nature of that event. Built in with this is the culture of the company. If we must lead through disruption from a corporate setting, the culture of the company must reflect that. So in other words, you speak from on top, but it must be echoed from the bottom. You cannot say anymore that the board of directors have a crisis management plan and nobody else in the company knows about it. It has to be embedded in the culture. So our operations have to change, and culture change is a lot more tedious and takes a lot more effort than getting a loan or a grant to do something. So culture builds on the strategy, and it becomes part of the company, and it lends to the resilient ability of the company. Partnerships and networking for shared resources. It was mentioned, I think, in the previous session. The Caribbean, having lived, let me put it this way, the Caribbean, when I first left Trinidad to go to work in Barbados, you felt very, very much, you started to recognize all the other Trinis on the island. And when I went to Jamaica, where I also have roots, I have Vincentian and Jamaican roots. When I went to work in Jamaica, I started, gravitating towards the Trinidadians and the Bajans, because I was there before. And then when I met my relatives, started graduating. When I left the Caribbean and went to work in America briefly, then I realized the people I was gravitating to was all Caribbean people. But in the Caribbean, we don't network effectively as we could. The idea of CARICOM still, sadly, is an idea that has a lot of potential. OECS, CARICOM, these are vehicles that we could use for small and medium enterprises, for sharing of resources. I joined Farm and Function group just 2 months ago, and one of the things that attracted me here is the idea of using local and Caribbean and CARICOM resources as substitutions for American and European and external food. So the cassava, the sorrel, instead of potatoes and cranberry. So these are the things we have to do, or we will not survive the next century. This is my opinion. The small and the medium businesses and enterprises are the ones that are going to be our lifeline. And to do that, we must have the strategy of building resilience by having these plans, practicing the plans, building the partnerships, being innovative, working on the human capital and regional integration. So I look forward to discussing that in more detail. That's my 2 cents. I'm sorry it was only on food, but that's my passion and my life.
No, but you raise, the issues you've raised cross all the industries, right? The governance issues, the planning issues, the human capital challenges, the CARICOM integration issues and common regulation challenge issue. A lot of those things govern across the businesses. And I really appreciate, you coming in at the last minute with a wonderful presentation to really make us think about a lot of these issues. So it's wonderful. I thought all the panel discussions were excellent and feed into some common themes that we're seeing throughout the conference. As a longtime banker and for many years in the Caribbean, we saw these challenges, and I think Sonji, you recognized and identified the financing gap that stretches across the region. $1.2 billion, and how do we close that gap? And that leads into the governance issues, and the lack of financial statements and plans and processes in place that hold back the financing, both from the private markets, the banking sector, and of course the public markets, which have the highest level of governance requirements and information requirements, all of which are sometimes seen as too difficult, too onerous, especially to founders who just want to focus on the business and driving forward. So, it's a challenge that we see not only in the Caribbean, see it in Canada. I saw it when I was living in Asia. It's a common issue. How does that SME make that bridge? Part of what we're seeing now, and Scotia is doing it, some other banks around the region are doing it, the consultancies are doing it. Scotia has this program, and I only mention it because I'm most aware of it, called Scotia Vision Achiever in Jamaica. And it takes a group of entrepreneurs through, I think it's a year-long session of various things to help them with governance, financial statement preparation, financing, cybersecurity, innovation. It's like a mini MBA type of course. And they come out of that with some of the tools that they need now to address the gaps that we've all identified, which holds them back from, raising the money that they need, being ready for innovation, being ready for disruption. So, and that comes down, I think, to the issue you raised, Riyadh, around human capital, where the businesses, and we see this in, I'm a director of some of the Grace Kennedy businesses, and even in a regional conglomerate like that, still, it's not a capital issue, it's a human capital issue. Do you have the right people in the right areas? It's that constant struggle. How do we obtain those kind of people? How do we bring them on? How do we keep them? How do we challenge them so that they stay with us and grow with us and take on those challenges that we need? So a lot of great issues raised. I see some progress across some of these things, and really impressed by your presentation, Emerson, around innovation and the new standard in place. If you can maybe just talk a little bit, I'm sure everybody's very interested, talk a little bit about that, and how does that provide the structure and framework to help SMEs and businesses, internalize that process and ensure they get value from creativity, and it leads back to your food business. I see some of the greatest foods in the world coming out of the Caribbean. I see them on the shelves here in Canada from various companies. That's not an easy thing to do. So how does the innovation structure maybe help that, Emerson? If you can maybe chat a bit about that.
Yeah, so innovation, if it does happen in the Caribbean, it happens on an ad hoc basis. It happens once, and maybe the next few years we have a new major innovation. We are great at the little incremental innovation. So in terms of in terms of food, we will easily come up with a new flavor, a new label, and things like that. But what I really like about the innovation standard is that it provides it for those who don't know anything about innovation is a great start. And we have to acknowledge we don't know how to innovate. And many times I see people talking about one aspect of innovation, but not a holistic approach. And this can ensure that for those who like to tick the boxes, if you're talking about innovation leadership, I can now come and say, no problem. If your firm is innovative or your leadership is innovative, that means you have 5 things. You have leadership commitment, you have an innovation strategy, innovation policy, an innovative culture, and roles, responsibilities, and authorities for innovation. And most firms don't have that, but they still will say that they are committed to innovation. It follows the overall ISO standard of plan. Well, we all know that. And it covers things that are not really covered in other standards. So as I said, what's an innovative culture? Having that level of experimentation. It is really useful in providing that structured approach to ensure that firms are created all the time.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's going to be, I guess that's going to be the challenge. Maybe Sonji, from a legal perspective, on the way firms are developing and the way things are moving forward, do you have any thoughts on how to commercialize the innovation, or how to use governance to improve the innovation side?
Sure, and just to join you in with the commendations to my panelists, Pierre and Emerson, I thoroughly enjoy both presentations, and from 2 different perspectives, but very, very, very thought-provoking. Emerson's presentation on innovation really just jerked me because, of course, I'm an IP practitioner. I mean, the part of my portfolio in my firm deals with the IPR management for clients. So very much in tune with the legal aspect of that. And just to endorse some of the points that Emerson's made, while we in the Caribbean, because of course this is a Caribbean platform, we are all creative. Whether that creation translates into tangible financial benefit is where the gap is. And of course, this triggers into your question. And when Emerson says that we are not innovative, somebody might say, oh, he's being very harsh, but it is a fact. It is a reality. So we come up with ideas, but is it a true innovation? Because, of course, we don't get back to the center point. We lawyers like to start with legal definitions. We always pulling out some authority that starts your premise with a legal definition. So you have to figure out what innovation is. So when you say you are an innovator, are you truly innovating? And Emerson's presentation ties in very much with Riyad's presentation. When you're faced in a situation of volatility, and in the business environment, uncertainty is a constant. We are constantly faced with change in an environment, as Riyad said, with global shocks that affect supply chains and stuff, and other matters that affect our business operations. How do we insulate ourselves from that, besides having documented risk management measures, which is what he was pointing to? Have all of these things documented, not calling up Uncle Harry and find out what do I do in a situation like that. It must be documented. Standard operating procedures must be documented. Dr. Vishnu spoke about that this morning, but tied in it to Emerson's presentation, if you are truly innovative, you are able to, in situations of volatility, in situations of uncertainty, be able to tap into that aspect of your being to find some measure that might help you to adapt to the change. Not that the change will impact you, but help you to adapt to the change in a way that it is less damaging to your business operations, to your financial well-being, to your emotional well-being, because all of that is part of survivability when we speak about SME survivability. So in response to your questions, from a legal perspective, in the Caribbean, and this is a fact, many of our Caribbean businesses don't understand IPRs. They don't understand what innovation is. Secondly, if they have some glimmer of understanding, they don't understand the value of it. They don't understand the need to protect it. They don't understand that it is a choice in action that actually attracts some proprietary rights that you can enforce, that you can protect, that you could commercialize. That is foreign to them. We try to, do these education exercises through our IP office throughout the Caribbean. How well that extends into reality is really very challenging. And Brandon, when you're speaking, there was one point that I wanted to just endorse, because you're referencing the Scotiabank experience in Jamaica. Our unit trust corporation actually has a kind of similar project. So it's called Scale Up. And why this is so good, if we're talking about expansion through exports, SMEs that develop just for domestic market have to look beyond the domestic market, like Farm and Function. And I have to say, Farm and Function was one of our awardees at the Chamber Champions of Business. You have to think beyond domestic market. How do you think beyond that domestic market? Is by scaling up. So the Unit Trust Corporation take these businesses, put them into this program, expose them to all of the governance requirements that you need, including the innovation aspect of it, so that you could scale up from domestic sales to regional exports to international exports, because that means our country will do well. Nationally, we will do well. We will earn the foreign exchange that we greatly need in Trinidad and Tobago, at least, and the country's growth at a national level will improve.
Great points. Riyadh, as you said, you worked throughout CARICOM in the food and manufacturing business. You must have come across these areas of innovation, exporting, growth, scale up.
Yeah, well,
comment a little bit on what your experience.
The Caribbean, well, what Emerson is saying is very, very true. And what Sonji is saying is also very true, because in the food industry, we like definitions too, to start off with, right? So there's a difference between innovation and an improvement.
Yeah.
So, innovations in the Caribbean are very few and far between. I mean, in the food industry, you can think about SM Jaleel. They patented the chubby bottle.
Yeah.
They came along with a number of other innovations in the food industry. In Jamaica, there have been some innovations in food, getting the hypoglycin A out of ackee. So it is there, but it is not, in my opinion, used as a tool. And if you use the ISO document, you could use it as a guidance document. It's not expensive. Any small or medium enterprise could get access to it. And they use it as a basic roadmap and actually put, from a governance framework, somebody responsible or a team responsible. And that way it becomes part of the culture of the company. And when you build innovation in the culture of your company, it gives you agility when there's a disruptive event. And when you have agility, you become resilient. There's a innovation that happened in the Caribbean a very long time ago. Again, I'm incredibly old. But I remember at one time, there was actually one company, the only one in the world at the time, that was allowed to bottle 2 international global brands of colas. And that very soon, in other parts of the world, on the other side of the globe, people started applying to do that too, using the same reasoning that was done in that particular South American country, right? It was a CARICOM country in South America. But the point is, innovations like that not only have to be once every 20 years. If it's done as a discipline, and it is just like environmental and social governance. How we in the Caribbean, we are very, very vulnerable as island states and coastal countries to environmental issues. But how many smaller SMEs have actually put aside resources, responsibilities, and actions for ESG and innovation?
Very challenging for them. They have a resource issue, human capital issue again.
But it could be different hats with the same person or the same persons or teams. As the important thing is to start. For
sure, absolutely right. Excellent, everybody. I think, Kamla, we open it now to the wider group of attendees for their questions.
Yes, and we do in fact have quite a long question in the chat from Colin. We have to invite Colin to be a panelist one of these days because he has a lot to share and to add.
He's a smart guy.
Yeah.
I know Colin well.
Right. So Colin, rather than we read through this, why don't we invite you to unmute and share your thoughts and ask your questions?
Yeah, my first question is to Brendan, to ask him which football team he's supporting in the World Cup. That's a really critical question.
There is no question. There's only one.
There's only one.
Beat Morocco and move on. Wait and see.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic, and I suppose my thoughts kind of go along the line. Brendan knows me, and I've been traversing the Caribbean for a long time, right? I think in any business, scale, being able to get to scale is important, whatever scale means, right? We're not talking about global multinationals, right? Being able to work in an environment that doesn't have huge structural deficiencies is also important, right? And there's been a lot of discussion around innovation, but I think one of the other aspects of it should also be around excellence, right? And during the course of the last 2 or 3 days, I've referred to Jamaica as a country where, I don't know where the debt to GDP was 8 to 10 years ago, but it's probably 120, 130%, right? And it's now hovering somewhere around 60, at least before Hurricane Melissa, right? So that's a really amazing turnaround, right? And we have to recognize that. So I use that as an example of excellence. If you look at the athletic program in Jamaica, especially the sprinting athletic program, where they were dominant in the world, right? For male and female, for over 10 years? Dominant. I mean, totally world-class, total dominance, right? Again, just to differentiate excellence from innovation. So Jamaica's been able to achieve a massive financial turnaround with no natural resources, okay? And coming out from heavy debt. And Jamaica has been able to develop an athletic program focused on the shorter sprints, right? That has been dominant for, I can't remember how long, but it's got to be at least 10 years, right? Because I think Bolt was there for 3 Olympics, right? So more than 10 years, right?
Yep.
So when you have small fragmented markets, it's very difficult to get to scale. And I feel that there are structural problems, right? It's not naming any country in the region, in the countries, and the way that the business communities try to position themselves to thrive or to survive. So, for example, in CARICOM, and I may have this data a little bit wrong, but what's in my mind is the population is probably $78 million. And in Central America, it's probably 50 million. Sorry, I mean, the population is around 78 million people, and in Central America, it's probably 50 plus, right? And I see very few Caribbean businesses trying to export or trying to establish footprints inside Central America, right? And if we have to move, we move north. We move into the United States, we move to Canada, we move to the United Kingdom, right? But those are certainly the United States and in the UK is big sophisticated markets, right? Competition is fierce, probably similarly in Canada. And we have markets in Central America, and it's largely ignored, right? So when I come back to the questions that I kind of put, that was going through my mind, how is the region, the countries, and business communities positioned to survive or thrive during this period of disruption? I am guessing, but I think on a scale of 1 to 10, we are near lower end of the scale. I don't want to call a number because I might get myself in trouble, right? With somebody, a former client or somebody, right? And I think about what are the deep structural inefficiencies that exist. So there's been conversations over the last 2 or 3 days about the number of companies that will go on the stock market. But the stock market is shallow. It's fairly liquid, right? P multiples are falling even when companies are producing significant results, better results, okay? Right? And there are structural issues facing our stock markets. And one of the issues that exists in some markets, not necessarily in all the markets, but as a general theme, equity is more expensive than debt generally. So why would an entrepreneur go for equity and dilute his ownership if it's A, it's more expensive, B, it leads to dilution, and 3, he can access the debt market, which is a typical loan or financing arrangement from a commercial bank at a lower cost. It makes no sense. And the market is going to go.
And that's what's happened, right? And that's why the capital markets are relatively thin in the region, right? Even though, the debt markets aren't perfect either by any stretch, but, they are improving and there is reasonable growth in debt to GDP levels. So you get like private debt to GDP. So you see that debt increasing. So the equity markets do have constraints for sure, and you've named them. But the incentives that that Sonji reminded us of are substantial. 100% tax waive for 5 years, 50% thereafter for the junior exchanges. Are certainly strong incentives and should be kind of thought to balance that off, especially for those entrepreneurs and businesses that see a longer term future. That really see their ability to grow, they'll need capital, they'll need different capital sources. They're starting to strain the debt equity levels of the business, so they need to get private capital. Now, angel investing, I think, is another area, Colin, and everybody, that we're seeing growth in the Caribbean. Like in the last 10 years, what we're seeing now compared to 10 years ago is impressive. Still, it's small, but that is becoming another area that maybe is an option for now. Companies who are not ready to go public, but want to broaden their shareholder base. So other good avenues. I think, Emerson, you got your hand up.
Yeah, Colin, you don't want to mention numbers, but I could give you a bunch of objective international and regional metrics. I mentioned some of them, the Global Innovation Index. Only 4 Caribbean countries are there. But I want everyone to focus on the very recent Carib Equity Caribbean Innovation Ecosystem reports, which first time ever we had an innovation report focused on it in the region. And the 15 Caribbean countries that were studied, they all fall on the lowest level of innovation in the world. There are major structural issues, right? The major one being governance. If you look at other parts of the world, Latin America, for example, or you look at in Europe, they all have national innovation agencies. They have so many national innovation agencies that strategically manage and coordinate the ecosystem. They have networks of them. I always remember I went to Amsterdam at a time, and the city itself had an innovation agency. They gave it a different name. And I could go, if I wanted to start a business, its entire role was to support me. Only in the Caribbean region, only Jamaica has a national innovation policy. And only the Dominican Republic has something akin to a high-level standing committee in Parliament for what I call still science, technology, innovation, and research. So if we could fill that governance layer with the standing committee in Parliament, National Innovation Agency, and the National Innovation Policy, that will really give a lot of support to our SMEs and all the players in the ecosystem.
So the agency, does the agency work directly with the entrepreneur to help them?
Yeah, so the same way I met, how it usually happens is that an innovation ecosystem management, for which there will very soon best practices released, they will come out in January. The entrepreneur and the SMEs are the center of it. And what happens is that usually in the Caribbean, if there's some sort of national innovation agency, whether in Trinidad is Neos or Creole, they want to do everything. And they more compete with other players than collaborate. Whereas a true ecosystem has multiple players working on multiple levels that support them and all the levels of development of their development. So, for example, when Apple Computers started, Steve Jobs, the companies that he dealt with when he just started would have been different for when he was scaling. And for each level, there are players to support multiple players. So even managing an ecosystem, we have a heavy command and control style in the region. We need to focus more like we are Gardner, trying to allow all these independent and interdependent players grow and prosper while we support them. But despite all these struggles, I just want to highlight Jamaica in particular. I am very intrigued with Jamaica, what Jamaica has done in terms of innovation. And the Global Innovation Index, they are the highest, still low, they are the highest. But they are the only one who has a national innovation policy. And there's a particular company from Trinidad called WePay, called All in We. He was operating in Trinidad. He had some level of success. But as soon as he went to Jamaica, he just exploded. All of a sudden, he was in West Africa. He was in Latin America. He was in North America. 2 years ago, he bought a firm in America. So I presume he's in the millionaire valuation at the moment. And he has made deals with some of the largest remittance companies in the world. So I myself want to know what is the juice and the flavor that Jamaica has, despite all the issues, that will allow those type of SMEs to grow.
Excellent. Sonji, you'd like to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Really, it was just to add to a point Colin raised on the listing, and of course, it's a confirmation as well as an extension of the point. The junior stock market, or the stock market as a whole, put the SME stock market aside, in Trinidad and Tobago is very sluggish. And there are a lot of explanations for that. But the prominent one, of course, is people treat it as annuity income as opposed to what it's supposed to be doing. So it doesn't resemble any of the stock markets in the international jurisdictions because it's supposed to be a continuous moving market, buying and selling and every day, not buying and holding for 20 years and thinking they could pass it on to the next generation as real property or investment in another entity. Why I had proposed the IPO conversation as a possible means of capital expansion and continuity and succession. We have SMEs that are family-owned businesses with no succession planning. The new generation has no interest in the company, zero. So what do they do in the end? They say, okay, well, we are old, we can't continue with the company, we have to sell the company, it's packaged, and then it's handed over to a conglomerate. I made the point, in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, and in the Caribbean, citizens have a cultural tie to products, a cultural tie to things that they use, that they consume. And if given the opportunity and the education that you could be an investor in that company, you could own a share in that company, they would jump at it. So I want to take the opportunity to put a plug on a friend and colleague of mine, CRM Wisdom, that has started at the junior and primary schools in teaching stock exchange listing to children, not just teaching them, having them trading. The kids are actually trading on our stock exchange, doing fabulously. So we will have, in about 10 or 15 years, a whole generation of children that are so fluent with buying and selling of stock and equities that it will change the dimension in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is where we need to be going. Debt financing, to me, is old school way of thinking. That is where we were compartmentalized. And I mean, I'm seeking this from my lawyer hat because I do it a dime a dozen every day for the last 26 years. So I'm very familiar, working with bankers like you, Brandon, that is the only structure we have in our mind. We have to think out of the box when we are talking about family, SME business, and survivability. You cannot, when the generation has decided, I cannot continue anymore, pack up the business and just hand it over to the highest bidder and not give an opportunity to the citizens of the country who would want to participate in owning that and continue that name and that brand for a long time. We have, what's his name? Musk, the world's first trillionaire. What made him the world's first trillionaire? Just what we're talking about now. Why can't we expand that conversation to the Caribbean? Why can't we get Caribbean SME business to understand that there is value in operating your company, and then when you're ready to have it listed, you could have it listed because all of your governance and operational procedures are in place. The structures are there that you could put it out in the market and have the citizens of your country feel like if it is our hegemony and it's our, we are tied to it and we want to be part of it and we will buy into it and we will make sure that it survives for the next 100 years. And that's the passion I feel about it. So it was just to add that flavor.
No, and I think it's very well placed too, because that's the future. You know, if you don't have good developed capital markets, it's going to be very difficult for the country to grow long term. The challenge I see, and we see it from the banking side, when it's difficult to get the company even to produce some financial statements for you to lend against. You know, it's things like, you know, we talked, a colleague talked about unit trust. I think it was Colin who talked about what's the unit trust. I mentioned what Scotia is doing. Other banks are doing it as well. That, you know, building of capacity in terms of, you know, proper boards, proper governance, proper policies documented, proper financial statements being prepared, transparency, you know, all the things that investors want. Because the last thing we want is failed IPOs and failed businesses and frauds take place, right? Because of the infrastructure that's not properly done. So, you know, I fully support everything you're saying, Sonji, on that, and I think it's critical. It was nice to see the Roberts Manufacturing IPO, or not IPO, but kind of additional public offering come onto the market. See something happen in Barbados as well. To your point, you know, a lot of people in Barbados wanted to buy into that because they're familiar with it. They know the products. They know the name. You know, so there is that inherent, I think, willingness to buy if they're given a product they can buy. So, great points raised by all. Any other questions, Kamla? I wasn't sure able to see.
No. There are no other questions. There are some comments, however, in the chat. And just before we get to them, I want to remind everyone we have put the survey link in the chat. I want to ask you, please give us your feedback, because this has been such an extraordinary panel as well. You know, and it will be useful for us to be able to share with them the formal feedback from those of you who have been sitting here really engaged with what they are sharing. All right, so that link is in the chat already. We have, after Colin's point, we have a feedback from Andrew Levy saying that energy costs are among the highest in the world, and I guess he was looking at Jamaica in particular. Then Saron Bailey sharing that when she had to consider the source of financing for her own business, she was willing to consider equity capital simply because investors were willing to wait for a return. She ended up deciding to go with a blend of debt and equity, but she has to make sure, of course, that the loan repayment every month, you know, is done. But investors are willing to wait.
And I think that's a great point. You know, equity capital is more patient generally, right? So, you know, they're investing in a long-term story. They're not investing for return tomorrow for the most part. They want to see the business grow, generate dividends, and then cash out at an appropriate time. So that's a great point, because the bank needs to be paid every month, every quarter, interest, principal. Sometimes you get a principal deferment, but generally, you know, that's a cash flow issue where the equity side perhaps is not, and can be used to invest in the long-term health of the business. So another good point for equity is it's normally a little more patient.
So then it's putting that ecosystem in place. I'm seeing a couple things, you know, the gaps that exist. So Emerson spoke specifically about the ecosystem that need to exist in order to support these organizations. And of course, we have to look at very practical things like your governance structures and, you know, the systems, and so that would ensure that your organization is set up for long-term success. And, you know, so there's a lot, I think, that we can do to change what is happening Sonji, I was so pleased to learn about what you were sharing with the young persons. I'll tell you at
Yeah,
my
that's exciting.
yeah, the most I've done in terms of investing in the market is when there was the IPO for the second IPO that was for First Citizens, and then there was also the IPO which followed some time later with NEL. But I am not familiar with the stock market, and I just haven't had the time, although I felt it's a useful thing that we need to understand. And it is important that we learn how to really use all of these tools. And that I think is what has been one of our challenges in persons being able to move forward. It is one of the things that Riyadh said, which is that, and I'll tell you, it's the same for my children and I. Once we travel out of Trinidad, you meet someone with a Trini accent, you're all excited, because
Yes.
we love each other once we leave the shores. But once we are here, it's so difficult to get people to work together. But we have to.
Well,
Collaboration.
that's even across the region, right? The whole CARICOM issue, like I think, Riyadh, you might have said it, the individual markets are small. Even together,
Yes.
CARICOM's not that big, but it is a lot bigger than the individual countries. So, can we get a uniformity of standards across the CARICOM region in terms of compliance and food safety and financial reporting? Imagine having to file reports in every little country, the cost of that is overwhelming. So how do we, bring some scale to this to help business? Because you've worked across them, right? Are you seeing any progress along that area?
Slow, but slow and slow, not slow and sure. I mean,
Slow and choppy?
Jamaica has done a lot of good stuff in the last, I would say, 10, 15 years. A lot of good stuff in terms of standardization. Trinidad, but I mean, look at how small we are. And right now, just as, on food, if you want to export your food from Jamaica or Trinidad to a non-Commonwealth Caribbean country, it's a totally different set of laws and regulations and import and export tariffs and rules. It's really, really a morass.
You're saying non-CARICOM?
Well, they're in the Caribbean, but they're not in CARICOM.
Legal system.
Correct. So if you want to export from Jamaica to Guadeloupe or to Saint Martin or to French Guyana, I mean, when I lived in Suriname, it was a 5-minute boat ride across, stamp your passport. But to carry to sell anything across there, it's a lot of legal red tape.
Yeah.
So we have a lot
of
those
are huge costs. Huge costs.
Yeah, no. And we have a lot
of things.
Time
and money and
correct.
Education.
So the capacity building in the Caribbean is what we need to look at as one Caribbean.
100% agree. And I know everybody's talked it, but it's the political will to really get things done, right? That continues to be the challenge. Hopefully you're seeing citizens put a lot of pressure on, a lot of push to get things going. You see the editorials in the newspapers to get this stuff going. And I guess they've got that 2-tier track now. Maybe that'll help where countries who are prepared, they can go faster, not have to have everybody at the same pace. So I think that's hopefully a positive step, but you got to make progress there so we can, facilitate scale, because scale allows you to invest. If you're in a small market, you don't have scale, you can't hire, you can't invest in technology, which, from the innovation perspective is critical. Technology costs are coming down, but they're still expensive. So you need to be able to scale to support all this, human capital and technology, etc. So,
correct.
I'm not sure if we're on time.
Just to touch on the financing
that.
issue, especially from IPOs and equity financing. In the banking world, they say they look at, I think, these 3 C's of banking, 3 or 4 C's, and one of them is character. But if I am going to invest in a firm, I'm looking to see that it has growth prospects. And the character I will look at from an equity perspective will be the 8 innovation management principles. And if they don't have at least half of them, I won't invest. So, of course, they must be looking to realize value, having future-focused leaders, having an innovation strategy where they're looking to incorporate the latest technology into their building their capabilities. Of course, that innovative culture where experimentation and the willingness to fail is accepted, the willingness to exploit insights, manage uncertainty, which we know we are very fearful of, and having adaptable structures, and of course, having a systems approach, which is the International Innovation Standard, the ISO 6001. That is the character I'll be looking at. And there are few firms that embody that. So I mentioned all the way from WePay. There's Rams Logistics, which they have been doing fantastic with innovation, IP, and research. And there are few firms, but that's the problem. There are just a few. And when I look at the evidence for it in terms of number of patents, when you look at a country like Singapore, which has, I think, only 5 million people, something, that's a small amount of people, they register hundreds of thousands of patents every year. Whereas in the Caribbean region, we're probably lucky to get 5 every year, and most times we'll have 0. So, and so those innovation management principles and those patterns are things that we need to look at even before we really start talking about the IPOs, because I'm going to invest in your IPO, and Elon Musk is looking to take over the world, but you're just looking to focus on the region and not have all these things in place.
Yes. Brandon,
excellent point.
3 minutes away from close time, so you can in fact ask your panelists for their closing thoughts.
Wonderful. Why don't we talk with you, Sonji? You let us off. Why don't you help us close?
Thank you, Brandon. Ladies first.
Always.
Well, to summarize, I think all of the points kind of were brought together very, very perfectly. And if we are building our country, building our community, CARICOM community, it starts with building the SME sector. You know, it's a broken record when we say the SME sector is the backbone of national development, because it is a fact. So it's said ad nauseum. So if it is, then we have to be serious about ensuring our SMEs understand what good governance means. And having good governance at the start of your company operations and having all of those processes and procedures in place will do you well in the future. Whether you wish to keep it as a family-owned business for the next 150 years, I think Dr. Vishnu said this morning, he traced his own back to 1903. I was so impressed with that. Or you wish at some point in time to allow the citizens of your country. I like the idea that Colin postulated with having the CARICOM cross-listing thing, having the citizens of CARICOM invest in it and feel a part of it. The structures you put in place at the beginning will aid all of that development as you go forward. It will help you to be resilient. It will help you to be sustainable. It will help you to be innovative and adaptable. And at the end of the day, it will redound well to your national development. And that is what we are all about, because we live here. You know, that's a saying we have in the Caribbean, Brandon. We live here. This is our home, whether we call it Trinidad and Tobago, the CARICOM. I profess to be a CARICOM person. So we live here. So we want here to be better. Here meaning our CARICOM community. And it being better means our businesses must do better. And doing better in business starts with, to plug for Kamala, good governance.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Thank you. Very, very well said. Ria, thank you again for joining us, in the, kind of at the last minute, but would really welcome your final thoughts as well.
Well, final thoughts very quickly. 3 sentences. Disruption in the Caribbean is no longer the unexpected and unwanted storm. It's the climate which as SMEs must now learn to navigate. And strong governance turns disruption from a threat into an opportunity. And that is governance. And the future of the Caribbean will be defined not by disruptions that we face as SMEs, but by the governance structures, practices, and leadership that we show.
Very well said.
That's my 3 cents.
Yeah, very well said. Because governance puts a framework and structures in place to allow you to anticipate the disruption and then manage through it and profit from it, right? So It's very, very well said. It's something obviously I believe very deeply, working with Kamala and the team at the CCGI. I'll turn it over to you, Emerson, for final words.
from a national and regional perspective, I would say if you're not measuring it, you're not managing it. And we have all these indicators for innovation, whether it's the Global Innovation Index or the Carib Equity Report. I don't ever hear anyone say, well, hey, the strategic aim for CARICOM is to raise the Caribbean countries from 77th in the world to the top 50 by a certain period of time. So there are no goals. But despite that, we still have firms that are expanding and scaling internationally. So on the firm level, I want them to focus on one, these three capabilities I mentioned, always be scanning your environment, always be looking to build internal capabilities, and looking to build your own personal firm level ecosystem, because the question is no longer who can do the job, but who can grow with us, innovate with us, and sustain with us. And for that, the International Innovation Standard should be your key guiding framework.
Thank you so much, Emerson. You really introduced a whole new framework for us, and many of us had not have as much information on it. So thank you so much for sharing about that. Been a wonderful contribution. Kamala, I think this panel has stood up with all the rest. So I'm standing up for my panel.
Yes.
Thank you for your guidance as always.
Of course. No, this was such a brilliant panel. I really, really, truly enjoyed it from beginning to end. And, I'm so happy that we do have this forum that we can capture all of this information. Just to let everybody know too, we do post all of these panel discussions onto our YouTube channel. It's there freely available that persons can go back and look at, get information. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be improving our understanding of what are the issues and challenges here in the region. So I want to say a very, very, very sincere thank you to panel 2 here on the topic Leading Through Disruption, Governance and Risk for SMEs. We had Sonji Pierre Chase, good friend of mine, attorney at law from JCS Law Firm, former president of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Emerson John Charles, son of one of my former law lecturers. He's the ISO National Innovation Expert and Chairman of Innovation Association of Trinidad and Tobago. And joining us, a relatively new friend of mine. I met him when he just returned from Suriname, and we are now getting to know each other well. Riyad Singh, Chief Operations Officer at Farm and Function Limited, back here in Trinidad and Tobago. It was wonderful to hear the many experiences across the region. And Brendan, thank you so much for an excellent job in moderating this session. It really helped bring out a lot of the issues and concerns for us. So thank you all so very much.
Thanks, everybody.
We are going on a short break now, and then we come back with our final panel for today. That's going to be looking at succession without conflict, structure for continuity and stability. Our panelists are Andrew Rowe, a director from GA Rowe & Sons in Belize, Ria Manki Sukram, an attorney at law, family business and family wealth advisor here in Trinidad and Tobago, and Yolande Christopher, an attorney at law out of Jamaica. And our moderator will be Adele Bag Rameshwar, the Assistant General Manager at InfoLink Services Limited here in Trinidad and Tobago. I am sure we can expect another great contribution from this panel. So, Quantrell, let's play our video to say thank you to our sponsors as we wrap up yet another exceptional panel discussion. Right, thank you.